Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here. You're watching our video review of the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge. They couldn't sit still at just making one flagship smartphone, but instead, Samsung decides that two is better than one, and that's where the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge comes to play. It's a unique looking phone that has a very cool appeal. It sports the same new design language as the S6, but one notable difference, and that's with the dual edge display. Now, when you think of flagship devices, this is prepping to be one formidable handset. It has all the guts, and it looks like to be a standout hit so far in 2015. So let's find out. Well, it shares the same new design language as its sibling in the S6. The S6 Edge has something noticeably different about it, and that's its dual curved display. And with that, it just gives it a slightly more attractive look than its sibling. Now, it has the same premium quality that we're seeing in the S6, so it's constructed with some really fantastic choice of materials. You have the Gorilla Glass 4 front and bottom surfaces, which is held together in place by a metal trim bezel. It's thicker on the top and bottom edges, but around the left and right sides, it's skinnier, so that makes it a little bit deceptively thinner than it really is. But in doing so, it gives it a sharper feel, so it's not quite as comfortable to hold in the hand as the S6. Now, the good thing about the dual curved display is that it bounces light off in a very dazzling manner, and like I said, it has a more seamless, attractive look than the standard S6. Now, when you're interacting with the display, it offers for a more natural feel as you're doing so. But beyond that, again, we have to applaud Samsung for this new direction. The S6 Edge is no doubt one appealing looking smartphone. Obviously, we have to commend Samsung for the phenomenal job they've done with the design of the handset. It's just utterly gorgeous. Now, there's both good and bad. We know the good, it's streamlined, it's lightweight, compact, and has that premium aesthetic, but the downside is that it's missing some of the characteristics we saw in last year's S5. So no longer does it have a water-resistant construction. You can't submerge underwater. It doesn't have a micro SD card slot to increase its storage capacity, nor does it offer a removable battery, but it does have wireless charging built in. It supports both the PMA and Qi standards, so you have that. Beyond that, it's distinctively a Galaxy smartphone, evident by the home button below the display. It's tactile, super springy, and incorporates the fingerprint sensor. Now, the sensor itself is an improvement over last year, just because we no longer have to fiddle around with it. All we have to do now is just gently press our finger over it and it unlocks the device for us. It's simple and intuitive. It's flanked by the back and recent apps menu keys. On the left side of the phone, you have just the volume controls. They're separated, good rigid feel to them, and super springy. On the top, the IR blaster, nano SIM slot, and the noise cancellation microphone. On the right, just the dedicated power button. And finally, in the bottom, you just have 3.5mm headset jack, the micro USB 2.0 port, microphone, and the speaker grill. If we flip it out to the rear, what we have here is just a 16 megapixel camera. Nearby, we have an LED flash and the fingerprint sensor. As you can tell with the camera though, the lens juts out from the surrounding area, and because the handset is top heavy, if you accidentally drop it, even from a short height, it'll probably come in contact with the camera first, so you gotta be careful about that. This shares the same specs as the S6's display. It's a 5.1-inch 1440 by 2560 Quad HD Super AMOLED display. So with that, it's incredibly sharp and it has all the qualities of the display technology. You have the wide viewing angles, you have those punchy looking colors, and there's a lot of similarities between this and the S6's display. For one, it's pretty potent outdoors when the sun is present. It has a brightness output of 553 nits, making it more than visible just because it jumps into that high contrast mode in the automatic setting. But strangely enough, if you set it manually to the maximum brightness output, it only puts out 172 nits, which is vastly underpowered compared to the S6's display at the same setting. At the same time too, its color temperature is slightly cooler. It's at 6800 Kelvin in comparison to the 6550 Kelvin mark of the S6 display. So with that, we do notice just a little hint of bluishness to whites, but that's about it. It still has a good amount of vibrancy, and it's also incredibly color accurate as well. The star of the show here is the dual curved display of the handset. It's what makes it more attractive than the S6. But unlike the Note Edge and its curved display, the two here are more for the aesthetics rather than the functions. So it's pretty basic and minimal in what it offers. So the first thing here, you could actually activate the various information tickers by swiping either in the top or bottom or one left or right edges. And from here, we could see the time, the day, the weather condition, and temperature. If we swipe over, we could see some of our other tickers here, such as the sports one. You have your notifications, Yahoo News, Twitter ticker, and you even have one for your stocks. You could download additional ones too. There's another feature where you could set it in the settings to actually turn on automatically during a certain time period at night, say from 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. in the morning. So the edge will be slit slightly so you can see the time and date. The second thing with the dual curve display is that you have now this thing called the People Edge. It's accessible via the lock screen or the home screen. It's this ribbon here on the side. When you pull it out, you can see some of your favorite contacts, and from here we just have access to being able to call them, send a message, or send an email to them, and that's pretty much it. The other thing is when you're receiving an incoming phone call from one of them, you could see how they're differentiated by the color. The handset will glow on its sides and show this dazzling effect when the phone's placed upside down on its display. So it'll show off this color pattern here, but the effect's only noticeable if you have the handset placed on a reflective surface. If it's not, you're really not going to see it all that much. And just kind of weird that you have to actually have the handset face down on the display like that. Overall, like I said, the dual curved display is there mainly for the aesthetics rather than for the features. The software experience too receives its fair share of changes, and they're the good kind of changes. Now I'm going to show you what this latest version of TouchWiz is running on the Galaxy S6, but it's no different on the Galaxy S6 Edge. There are some added features, but I'll talk about that in the review of the Galaxy S6 Edge. So with this version of TouchWiz running on top of Android 5.0.2 Lollipop, they've gone more with a less is more approach. So it's more of a simplified, straightforward experience than ever before. And see it right away with the visual presentation here at the home screen. So you have a cleaner looking font type, you have larger size icons in the app panel, and it makes use of Google's material design. So it uses bright colors to accent several of the core applications with the experience. And you also have that parallax-like effects with the background wallpaper. So if you tilt it, you sense a depth, you get a sense of depth with it. But beyond that, the new thing here is the ability to download various themes, and that really accentuates the experience just because you could have it very different looking from before. So not only does it change things like the wallpaper, but as well as the icons themselves and the layout of several of the core applications like the dial pad, the calendar, and even the calculator. And it's a good way of complementing your personality. Now, this is becoming more apparent with many of the software experience we've seen, but we don't find it quite as expansive as what HTC is doing with Sense 7.0, but still in a good direction. In terms of feature set, they've reduced it tremendously from before. Gone are things like air view and air gestures. Instead, you have some of the core ones that remain here. For example, you have one-handed mode, so you could put some of the core applications into a smaller window, so it's easier to interact with one finger. Secondly, you have also multi-window. It's still available here. You can access it by going through the Rolodex in the recent apps menu, or just by holding down the recent apps menu itself. You have two applications running on top of one another, so you have that true multitasking experience. Overall though, it's just nice that they've gone with a simplified experience. There are not as many redundancies with it, and it's not overwhelming. Instead, what we have here is just a very streamlined interface, along with the feature set, allows for even first-time users to jump right in, and we do really appreciate this new direction. So Xiaomi decided to go all in-house, empowering both its Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. It's using the octa-core Exynos 7420 processor, which is based on 64-bit architecture. And interestingly enough, it shares some commonalities with Qualcomm's Snapdragon 810 chip. Basically, it consists of 4 Cortex-A57 cores running at 2.1 GHz, and then you have another 4 Cortex-A53 cores running in at 1.5 GHz. Now, what's different about the two is that the Exynos chip is manufactured using the 14nm process, whereas the Snapdragon 810 goes with the 20nm process. So with that, you get some space saving in the process, and subsequently you'd hope to get also better power efficiency out of it. The result though is the fastest Galaxy S phones we've seen to date. It has a lot of finesse, super snappy, very responsive. Navigating through the home screen here is a breeze. It launches apps. You can move in and out of different ones very quickly, and it's just nice that there's no lag from what we've seen so far. And it's even great for gaming. If you're playing some of those 3D demanding games, you're not gonna have an issue here with the handset. It's just buttery smooth. But then again, we kind of question its long-term consistency, just because the Note 4 before, after months of using it, installing different applications, we tend to see a diminished performance over time. But we're certainly hopeful about the experience here with the S6. So right now, for what it is just unbelievably fast. Honestly, we've never been disappointed by the cameras in Samsung smartphones. They're always class-leading, evident by the Galaxy S5's camera and subsequently the Note 4. And with the S6 and the S6 Edge, they're surely coming to the table with something spectacular as well. Now, both handsets are paired with the same 16-megapixel Sony sensor used by the Note 4, but this time around, they've been fashioned with an even wider f1.9 aperture lens. And with that, it's able to actually draw in more light, so you could expect it to perform better under lower lighting conditions. Now, before I go into the quality itself, let's talk about the camera app. Now, the cool thing about it is that you can instantly launch it by just double pressing the home button anytime, even when it's turned off, and it'll jump into the interface itself right away. And just like the less is more approach of TouchWiz, we see it here as it's sporting a cleaner looking UI. It's not as cluttered as last year. The majority of the space is reserved for the viewfinder. It's flanked by some icons on the left and right sides. The left sides, you have things like HDR. You could add different effects, set the timer, and change the modes like the resolution and whatnot. While on the right, you have the shutter keys and you have the various modes. Now, the various modes include auto, selective focus, panoramic, slow motion, fast motion, virtual shot. You can download some additional ones too from the store if you want. But the most compelling one here is the Pro mode. Now, this is going to appease hardcore shutterbugs just because you could change some of the parameters here with the camera. You could adjust the white balance if you want, the ISO, the exposure compensation, and you could even change some of the color temperature here and also the focus. So it's really nice to have this at your disposal. When you want to capture the moment, nothing does justice like the camera in the S6 and the S6 Edge. It just takes some amazing looking photos to die for. Now, the 16-megapixel cameras are most effective when lighting is in abundance. So with outdoor shots, you're going to capture a ton of detail, and overall the photos come out very sharp. You have some versatility in that just because you could crop photos later on without any loss in quality. It handles dynamic range pretty decently. It has a very neutral exposure, although when HDR mode is used, it actually touches the shadows and highlights to further draw out some of the details. Now, most phones crumble under the pressure when it comes to low lighting photography, but that's not the case here with the handsets. Now, thanks to its wider f1.9 aperture lens and paired with its optical image stabilization, the S6 and the S6 Edge is pretty usable under lower lighting conditions. Now, of course, there's that certain degree of diminished quality when compared to outdoor shots where lighting's plentiful. but it's minimalized to the point that, surprisingly enough, details are still defined, although a little bit on the softer side, but it's still complemented with a delightful white balance setting, and best of all, noise is pretty much minimalized in the process. So nighttime photography proves to be very good with the handset. Now, on top of that, you have things like panoramic mode. It's a seamless process this time around. It's simple and quick, and it stitches the photos together in a seamless fashion, so there's no artifacting or any odd discrepancies in the shots. Its selective focus mode is great at capturing macro shots as well, just because you could add that bokeh or out of focus effect post shot, and it accentuates the subject that's in the shot. And finally, there is the virtual shot mode, which is a little bit gimmicky, to tell you the truth, just because you take a 360-degree capture of a subject, and later on you could go back and interact with it. We wouldn't use it as much, to tell you the truth, but it's there if you want to use it. Overall, though, the new 16-megapixel camera is a beast of its own. It is a great replacement to any point-and-shoot, and goes to show that Samsung knows how to make some killer cameras for its phones. At the same time, you won't be disappointed either with its video recording quality. Now, there are a ton of different modes offered by the handset. You have Ultra HD, Quad HD, 1080p at 60 and 30 frames per second, and 720p at 120 frames per second. Whichever one you go with, you won't be disappointed at all. Now, the best, of course, is going to be Ultra HD, just because of the staggering amount of details it's able to capture. It has a very gradual exposure adjustment, the continuous autofocus is spot on, and optical image stabilization helps to keep it shake-free. There's even a very useful magnification up to 8 times digital zoom, and when you pair that with 4K recording, it's still more than usable on several occasions. As you can tell, the music player also follows in the software's new direction. It's simpler looking, straightforward, and not as cluttered as before. It's pleasant looking, but not as dazzling compared to the Sense 7.0 music player. Now, with the single speaker of the handset, it produces an output of 75.4 decibels, a little bit better than the S6's 73.7 decibel mark, but still lacking any sort of bite behind its punch. So the entire thing still sounds a little bit on the thin and light side. Luckily, there are the various sound alive settings you could tinker around with, so it better enhances the quality to give it a little bit more depth. You'd think that the dual curved display would add some value to the video watching experience over the standard S6, but it really doesn't. It still has the same experience as its sibling. And with the Quad HD Super AMOLED display, especially when you have it on adaptive mode, it actually enhances the experience just because colors are poppier, more punchy in tone. It has a wide array of codec support out of the box, so you can actually watch your videos. You still have the pop-up play video, so you have that multitasking element in play. So when you have it enabled, the video will load in its own separate window, and from here you can do other things while you're watching a video. Average is probably the best word to describe the handset's call quality performance. It's not good, not bad, it's just usable. So volume through the earpiece is decent. You'll be able to hear voices very easily, but there's a subtle amount of hiss that accompanies it, which in turn kind of distorts it just by a little bit. Our callers fare better on the other end of the line, just because voices are clear and distinct. And if you go with the hands-free route, just know that the speakerphone is pretty strong, so it's more than usable in noisy conditions. Strangely, it's the S6 Edge that has the higher capacity battery, a 2600 milliamp hour one, whereas with the standard S6, it has a smaller 2550 milliamp hour battery. Now, you would think that there's more space inside of the S6 because of the dual curve display nature of the handset here, but that's certainly not the case. Now, using both handsets in our normal everyday use, we find that the S6 Edge eats up battery faster. That's using it for sending text messages, making phone calls, surfing the web, and whatnot. Luckily, though, sporadic charging is not an issue just because of the rapid charging system it offers. So you can go from 0 to 100 in a matter of 83 minutes, so it's pretty fast. And you also have the convenience of charging it wirelessly. Even more intriguing is the result of the handset in our battery benchmark tests. Now normally when we test the phone's battery, we run a script, we set their displays to 200 nits, and from there we let it go until it dies. The S6, for example, produced a mark of 7 hours and 14 minutes in our battery benchmark test, which is good. But the S6 Edge is higher at 8 hours and 11 minutes. But that's because the brightness output of this handset was set to 180 nits. That's the highest value the display could go on a manual setting. So that could kind of skew the results in favor of the S6 Edge. So who knows, it might be on the same page as its sibling if it were set at the normal rate of 200 nits. You could say that the Galaxy S6 is the safe approach when it comes to designing a smartphone. It's kind of conventional, but this is Samsung we're talking about, and they want to stand out, they want to make some noise, and they want to be unique, and they succeed in doing so with the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge. It's just a better looking smartphone than its sibling, and that's partly attributed to the dual curved display of the handset, which gives it a higher degree of aesthetic appeal than its sibling. But on the function side, the dual curved display is not really all that great with the feature set. It's kind of slim in what it does, but honestly, the design in itself is what's most profound here. And to top it off, the S6 Edge is still the same high-class performer as its sibling. So it takes some stunning photos, its performance is outstanding, and the software experience is the same. So even though you might pay a little bit more money to pick up the S6 Edge, or maybe not, it's something we'd gladly pay more just because of its beautiful looks. So if you guys want to learn more about the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.